Hi there, this is Kaushik Ranchod from the Ranchod Law Group. Welcome to our weekly immigration show. I'm an immigration attorney that represents clients throughout the 50 states. So you'll want to stay tuned because we have a hot topic today. And this is a question that I get very often, and it's what are the top documents for my I601A, I601 waiver application. So we're going to go over that. And if you haven't already, smash the like button. But more importantly, please subscribe. A lot of viewers, but only about 6 or 7% of you are subscribing. And I want to make sure that you keep informed of the latest and the greatest. All right, now that we got that going, let's talk about the I601A and the I601 hardship waiver and the top documents. First of all, why do you need an I601A or I601 waiver? Well, this is if you want to get a green card and you need to overcome, in legal jargon, what are called grounds of inadmissibility. So the I601 can get rid of more grounds of inadmissibility than the I601A. The I601A is if you've overstayed, if you've been here for more than 3 or 10 years and you leave and you trigger those bars, that's what it'll get rid of. And that's all the I601A is designed for. Whereas the I601, that will overcome possibly fraud or misrepresentation if you qualify, certain types of criminal grounds if you qualify. And today we're going to talk about some of the top documents that could help demonstrate that you should get an approval based off of extreme hardship, which is what helps you qualify. Important to note here that the I601A, you can apply in the United States before you apply for your interview. The I601, you might be able to apply with your adjustment of status application, depending upon what type of waiver you're applying for, or you may already be outside of the United States. When preparing your I601 or I601A, it's really important to provide as much documentation as possible because USCIS is not going to take your hardship for granted. So you have to demonstrate as the US citizen how there's going to be hardship to you if you're separated from your spouse or if you had to go with them to their home country. So those two separate grounds. And one way to demonstrate that is through the documents. And then what we like to do is look at those documents and prepare a legal argument explaining why there would be extreme hardship. The documents are the foundation for your case. While there are differences with the I601A and the I601 waiver in terms of procedure, in terms of process, in terms of what they'll overcome, the similarity is the documentation that is required. Now, let's talk about the I601A process so you're aware of the entire process. The I601A process entails you applying the I-130 petition with USCIS, then going to the next step of the process, paying the NVC fee bills, then applying for the hardship waiver application. That's the most difficult part of this application. And then after that's approved, going to the NVC, completing the affidavit of support, the DS-260, other documents that need to be submitted, and then finally having the interview and having the medical. So it's a long process. This process is taking anywhere from 2 to 5+ years. Hopefully we're going to see that time come down because these times went way up with COVID. The I601A was created so that you're able to apply for the waiver in the United States because previously you only had the I601. If you were going to get rid of unlawful presence, you had to apply outside the United States and wait for the waiver to get approved. And if it didn't get approved, you'd be outside of the United States. The I601A waiver is great for overcoming the grounds of inadmissibility because you're in the United States before you actually have to leave. Let's look second at whether or not you even qualify, because you have to have a qualifying relative for the I601A. You have to have a U.S. citizen parent, lawful permanent resident parent, or U.S. citizen spouse or lawful permanent resident spouse. A child for the I601A does not qualify you for the waiver. So that's really important to note that a lot of times people think, oh, I have a U.S. citizen child, I can apply for this waiver. No, you can't, unfortunately. Then we can look at other immigration options, but we're focusing on the I601A and this discussion right now, and it will not allow you to apply. All right, now what you've been waiting for, the top, yes, I said top 17 documents. And these are not an exhaustive list. These are just some of the top documents that we like to include in our application. First, having a signed affidavit explaining the hardship that you would face if you were separated from your loved one, talking about the hardship, also talking about how you met, explaining your relationship. This is part of the foundation of your case and extremely important. Next is proof of U.S. citizenship of your U.S. citizen spouse or U.S. citizen parent, or lawful permanent residency for the parent or the spouse. So evidence of that. So for instance, for U.S. citizenship, that could be the birth certificate, that could be the naturalization certificate, that could be the certificate of citizenship. For lawful permanent residency, we like to include a copy of the green card, copies of your parents' or your children's birth certificates if applicable. This helps demonstrate that you have qualifying, if they're not qualifying relatives, it just helps demonstrate the family ties that you have in the United States. This next one is extremely important if you have a medical issue. And this is a letter from the doctor explaining the hardship if you had to leave the United States as the US citizen and why you need care in the United States. Of course, this letter also explains the medical condition you have, the seriousness of your issue that you have with your medical condition. You may also want to include a copy of every page of your passport, a copy of your birth certificate, a copy of your marriage certificate. Not only is it important to demonstrate the hardships, but it's also important that you've demonstrated that you have a real relationship. So pictures of you and your spouse together at family gatherings with relatives, those are also helpful as well. You also have to demonstrate that you haven't been married before, so it's helpful to also include prior divorce judgments as well. And of course, copies of prior immigration documentation. So an example of this would be a copy of your I-130 approval. If you had an I-130 filed for you before, you want to talk to your immigration attorney to make sure you provide the appropriate documentation, because you don't want to over document as well. And that's really important to note too. It's providing the exact right amount of documentation, because you don't want to over document as well. These officers that are reviewing your case do not have that much time to review your case. So when we prepare a case, we like it to be succinct. We like it to also be comprehensive, to include everything that you need. So it's a balancing test. It's like, you don't want the scale tip like that, and you don't want a tip like that. It's like, just like this. So you can have the perfect amount of documentation. You can have the comprehensive amount of documentation, and then boom, our goal is to get an approval. If you have adverse conditions in your country, which many of our clients do, then documentation demonstrating that there are adverse conditions in your home country, for instance, such as United Nations reports, information from the Department of State. Character references are also helpful as well. So this coming from prominent members of your community, for instance, your pastor from your church, law enforcement, or other prominent community members can be helpful in demonstrating your good moral character. These letters can help demonstrate that you also warrant an approval. Copies of awards you've won could also be helpful. And any other third-party documentation that you have could also be helpful. This is just some of the top documents. This is not an exhaustive list. When we submit an application, they can be hundreds and hundreds of pages. This is some of the top documents that we like to include, but it's not an all-inclusive list, but it'll help you get started on moving forward on your hardship waiver application. If you talk to an attorney, you'll already have an idea in your head. Okay, these are some of the things to look out for. The goal, let's remember the big picture. The goal is to demonstrate extreme hardship, and that's why you're getting all of these documents together to prepare a case that will demonstrate extreme hardship. These are very difficult cases to get approved, so I would recommend that you consult with an attorney to prepare a very thorough and detailed case, because this can make the difference between whether you're living in the United States or not. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and you are truly amazing because you're bettering yourself, and by bettering yourself, you're bettering your family, and by bettering your family, you're bettering the world. Thank you. Until next week. Bye for now.